friends since, and I have the utmost respect for Bob and his distinguished record of public service. And when he was named special counsel, I said his selection was good news, and that knowing him, I had confidence he would handle the matter properly. And I still have that confidence today. Given his public actions to date, I expect that the special counsel is well along in his investigation. At the same time, the president has been steadfast that he was not involved in any collusion with Russian attempts to interfere in the election. I believe it is in the best interest of everyone, the president, Congress, and the American people, that this matter be resolved by allowing the special counsel to complete his work.
But there were several other times during yesterday's confirmation hearing when the president's nominee for Attorney General, William Barr, avoided making commitments about how he would conduct himself related to the Mueller investigation and the president's conduct.
Will you commit to make public all of the report's conclusions, the Mueller report, even if some of the evidence supporting those conclusions can't be made public?
You know, that certainly is my goal and intent.
Will you commit that you will explain to us any changes or deletions that you make to the special counsel report that's submitted to you in whatever you present to us?
I will commit to providing as much information as I can consistent with the regulations.
You said that a president deliberately impairing the integrity or availability of evidence would be an instruction. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so what if a president told a witness not to cooperate with an investigation or hinted at a pardon?
You know, I'd have to know the specific. I'd have to know the specific facts.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate to go against the advice of career ethics officials that have recommended recusal? And can you give an example of under what situation or scenario you would go against their recommendation that you recuse yourself?
Well, there are different kinds of recusals. Some are mandated, for example, if you have a financial interest, but there are others that are judgment calls. And
let's imagine it's a judgment call, and the judgment by the career ethics officials in the agency are that you recuse yourself. Under what scenario would you not follow their recommendation?
If I disagreed with it.
And what would the basis of that disagreement be?
I came to a different judgment.
On what basis?
The facts.
Such as?
Such as whatever facts are relevant to the recusal.
Under what scenario would you imagine that you would not follow the recommendation of the career ethics officials in the Department of Justice to recuse yourself from the Mueller investigation?
If I disagreed with them.
Okay.
All right. Not getting anywhere there. Matt, what was your overall take of Mr. Barr's first day?
You know, in some ways, he is an obvious choice for Attorney General. He's obviously very well qualified. He knows the department. He knows its traditions. And he came in and said a lot of the right words that you expect to hear from an Attorney General nominee. But then there are some real concerns about him, and you highlighted them well. I think the first concern is when he talked about the end of the Mueller investigation, whether there is to be a report. We still don't know, of course, whether there will be a report. But if there is one, you know, he talked about it at other times in the hearing, like a declination or a prosecution memo, which are these memos that the department prosecutors write and send up the chain if they decide not to indict someone or they decide to bring an indictment. And in those, of course, are always confidential. They're never released publicly. The difference here is that under the department's own rules, the president can't be indicted. So we're not in a normal scenario. So it's hard to see how that kind of, you know, that scenario that he outlined where those documents remain confidential is the applicable one here. And that's why Democrats push for more transparency. His answers would be, I think his answers would still be somewhat acceptable, though, if it wasn't for this memo he'd written. And the memo gives you real concern, not just that he wrote the memo, not just that he expressed those aggressive views about executive power, but that he gave it to Bob Mueller's boss. He gave it to another official at DOJ who would become Bob Mueller's boss if Rod Rosenstein had been fired. And then he gave it to the president's inside counsel in the White House, his outside attorneys, to Mike Pence's attorney, to Jared Kushner's attorney. He was sort of sharing it with all the president's men and discussing it with all of them. And that raises questions about his impartiality that I don't think he went far enough to address. And the tell is that answer, that exchange with Kamala Harris, where he not only refuses to recuse himself, but won't commit to deferring to the advice of people we know are impartial. And that is such a break with precedent, because previous attorney generals of both parties, Jeff Sessions, Eric Holder, Deputy Attorneys General Rod Rosenstein, Sal Yates, all committed not just to seek the advice of ethics officials, but to follow it. And I think it's a real tell about what his intentions are that he wouldn't make that same commitment.
It's also a real tell that he wouldn't even say. There was another way he could have said it, which is, well, of course, I will certainly grant a great deal of deference to ethics officials that have come down, that have made a decision suggesting that maybe I should not be involved in it, and there would have to be a very compelling reason for me to ignore them. He didn't do that. He just said, I'll do what I want to do. If I disagree with it, I'll disagree with it. One other thing, too, I understand that it has been the guidelines of the Justice Department for some time that a sitting president cannot be indicted. But again, as you're suggesting, in this case, when you have an act, when you have a possibly illegal act that is the subject of the possible indictment, and that illegal act could be argued, that illegal act helped elect that president of the United States, then suggesting that a president of the United States cannot be indicted in all cases, that suddenly becomes a guideline that is meaningless, because it was the illegal act that could have possibly caused the election of the president.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, I think that opinion by the Department's Office of Legal Counsel is. I'm not sure it would hold up in the courts, but I also think it's somewhat of an academic debate, because I don't see the department overturning its opinion, and they're, of course, the ones that get to decide whether to bring charges or not. But it's an important conversation to have, because if the president can't be indicted, for that opinion to not be a farce, for the president to not be above the rule of law at all, it means that at the end of a department's investigation, if they find any evidence that the president committed a crime, or that that it may not be a crime, but it's a violation of his oath of office, which is something Barr indicated yesterday that a president trying to end an investigation, that impact on him would be, then it's incumbent upon the department to turn that evidence over to the body that is responsible for holding him accountable. That would be Congress. And we know, he has obviously criminal exposure in the Mueller probe, but there's actual evidence of criminality in the Southern District of New York probe. In that case, we know the Justice Department has essentially concluded he committed a crime. So there is a real question at the end of both of those probes, what happens? And I would have liked to have heard from Barr that, maybe we won't make that evidence public, but if we find evidence that the president committed a crime or that he violated his oath of office, we'll make it available to Congress.
And again, committed a crime possibly in the final weeks of the campaign to help get elected president of the United States. Mike Barnicle, you talk about farce. You have Trumpists right now who are writing opinion pages, people formerly respectable conservatives, who are now demanding that Robert Mueller have more transparency and he release information for the American people to read in the middle of his investigation, which they know is pure sophistry. They know is something that he's never going to do. And yet here we have Mr. Barr, who I believe did well yesterday. We have Mr. Barr suggesting he may not even be transparent with Congress or the American people with the final report, which I must say, in an otherwise strong job on Capitol Hill yesterday, that's something that really causes me grave concern, that they would not even allow, he would not even allow as Attorney General, Robert Mueller, to be transparent with the American people.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, Mr. Barr had a pretty good day yesterday in front of the United States Senate. He answered questions, specifically he answered questions that gave some relief to people who felt that he would perhaps interfere with Bob Mueller. He cleared that up. But there were two flags, as Matt just mentioned, as you have alluded to. One is his reluctance to agree to recusal, and the other is his reluctance to agree to release the complete Mueller report. And John Meacham, one of the interesting things about his testimony, I think to many people, was that it came as such a relief, I think, to a lot of people, given what's happened to the Justice Department. We have had a series of premeditated